Okay, so good evening. We're gonna learn something about Parshas Tetzaveh. That's the aim, and and really focus on something. What Tetzaveh tells us. Before we're talking about Aharon HaKohen, learn some, I think, really beautiful insights into what he was and how particularly the aspects of the Big Day Kahuna reveal certain things about Aharon HaKohen, from where there are essential things we can learn. The Kliyakar says at the beginning of the parsha, well, near the beginning, Perek Chof Ches Pasuk Aleph, Va'ato, the pasuk says, Va'ato akrevi lecha es Aharon achicha es bano b'toi mitoch b'nei Yisrael lechanu li. So Aharon HaKohen, Moshe Rabbeinu was told, you need to bring near Aharon HaKohen to serve me lechanu li. Aaron odov avio lozav esama b'nei Aaron. Of course, we bear in mind that the absence of Moshe Rabbeinu's name almost highlights Aaron's name, right? Va'ato Tetzaveh, Va'ato hakrevi lecha. We know Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, is not mentioned in Tetzaveh, right? Mecheni no misifracha, right? He says, raise me from my, and therefore that's fulfilled in Tetzaveh. So it almost puts Aharon HaKohen himself in shining light, so to speak. And there's a very brief, well, the Kliyakar is not brief, but there's a sort of part of the Kliyakar. The Kliyakar says that the first thing he says we need to understand is Aharon HaKohen is distanced as a result of the episode of the Egel Hazov, right? Just like the Bechorim, right? The first one was also distanced. Moshe Korvei b'tfiloso, he says. Moshe Rabbeinu drew him near through his tefillah. As we know, that it says that Aaron, we say in Devarim, it says in Devarim, I think it's in Parshas Ekev, that Hashem was also angry with Aaron, and Moshe Rabbeinu davened for him. And this idea of the tefillah was Moshe Rabbeinu put his life on the line for Aaron, and says the Kliyakar, he says, "Halo achi v'sorihu," and he's my flesh and blood, and if he is lost as a result of the Egel Hazov, then what will be with me? In other words, it's like I'm losing half of myself, just like he davened for Miriam. The same parallel was with Aharon HaKohen as well, and therefore, because Moshe Rabbeinu drew him near, that's why he was chosen in the zchus of Moshe, the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, and that's the first explanation of the Kliyakar. In other words, he says you should read the pasuk like this: even though he was mitoch b'nei Yisrael, he was also involved in Egel Hazov. Obviously, we're going with the view that chronologically, you understand, yeah, Egel Hazov is already taking place, right? So even though he was mitoch b'nei Yisrael, he was part of the b'nei Yisrael, he was involved in the Egel Hazov. Nevertheless, Koravim mitoch b'nei Yisrael ha'ovdim avakol ba'avurecho, he says, and it's all because of you, and that's why it says Va'ato hakrevi lecha es Aaron, right? Because you drew near or draw near Aharon HaKohen from amongst the b'nei Yisrael, even though he really should be the same position as them. You draw him near through your efforts, through your tefillah. But then he gives a different explanation, and he says that there is another aspect there's another way of understanding this pasuk. Is Doba Acher, the second paragraph. Lekach ne'emar mitoch b'nei Yisrael. This is why it says mitoch b'nei Yisrael, from amongst the b'nei Yisrael. If she'ein hanavur shora al nevi Yisrael, he b'schus Yisrael. The leaders of Klal Yisrael, right, Nevi'im, right? The only reason the Shechina rests on them, or Nevuah itself, is because of the Bnei Yisrael. It is only b'schus Yisrael, and therefore, Ubo Loma, just skipping a line, even Aaron should have been distant because of his role in the Egel Hazov. Hashem drew him near for two reasons. Number one, because of Moshe, because he was his brother. The honor of Aaron is the honor of Moshe. And the second is because the Bnei Yisrael needed a personality like Aharon HaKohen who could make peace. That's why in this pasuk, the two reasons and the two attributes, if you like, of Aharon HaKohen are presented. It is Va'ato hakrevi lecha, you draw him near. Okay, one aspect is because he was the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, but that's only half the story. The other half of the story is the fact that it is mitoch b'nei Yisrael, that our perspective on leadership, right, is that it only comes in the merit of those whom they lead. It is mitoch b'nei Yisrael. It's because of the merits of the b'nei Yisrael that they need you. They need someone of this type, and it's in their zchus that they merited to have Aharon HaKohen. And this theme, this idea, is also explained elsewhere as well. The Maral Diskin, Shuleb Diskin, has a slightly different perspective, which highlights even more than the Kli Yakar as this idea of being mitoch b'nei Yisrael. So to speak, he was one of the people, right? He was one of the people. He says like this, why does it say, draw him near from amongst the b'nei Yisrael? Because he says if it was Moshe Rabbeinu, if Moshe Rabbeinu would also become the Kohen Gadol, this is no, if you like, credit, or he calls it pe'er, it's no splendor for the Bnei Yisrael. Everyone knows about Moshe Rabbeinu already. Everyone knows that he's unique and special and great and incredible, right? But Aharon HaKohen doesn't have the same reputation, and therefore it is genuinely someone who the people will see that it's someone from them, as if he's, so to speak, a man of the people. It's difficult to sort of throw it in that way. He's obviously Moshe Rabbeinu's brother, but at the same time, he has that quality to him. Okay, so let's understand now what exactly his role was. So there are two. I'm going to present. Hopefully, try and learn two different ways of understanding the purpose of the Big Day Kohuna. So the next pasuk says, you shall make Big Day Kodesh for Aharon Achicha lechavod u'lesifaris, for glory and for splendor. And there's much discussion in the Mefarshim what that means. What does it mean lechavod u'lesifaris? What is the purpose of the begodim? But it's complicated by the next pasuk, because the next pasuk says v'ator again, hold this refrain again, and you tedaber al kol chachmei lev, speak to all those who are wise of heart. They've got the spirit of Chochmah. And they should make the begodim, the garments for Aaron. Why? To sanctify him. Lechahanoli, to serve me. Okay. So, the Chachmei Lev are those who are qualified, skilled, and say to able to do so. But in this pasuk, you've got a different reason for the begodim. You with me, yeah? The first pasuk says, pasuk base says, the purpose is for glory and for splendor. The second, right? The next pasuk says, why? What is the purpose? Lekadsho lechanoli, to sanctify him, to serve me. So are they begodim of service, or are they begodim which honor, right? Which honor the wearer? Which one is it? Right? That's what we need to understand. Now, the Oznaim LaTorah doesn't deal specifically with this point, but he does explain. He explains. He deals with the first reason that the Torah gives. Lechavod u'lesifaris. What does it mean as glory and to splendor? So he says like this: the Big Day Kohuna matorah na'ale shnia. We know that the begodim, the Big Day Kohuna, had a very important additional purpose. Lechaper al bnei Yisrael. They provided kapara, they provided atonement. This is a Gemara in Zvachim. Ma korbanos mechaprim of Big Day Kohuna mechaprim. Just like the korbanos would atone, so too the very garments that he wore also provided a kapara. So he says like this though, Ela shashnia novas mehorishona. So, because obviously the question is therefore, what is this? If this secondary purpose is to provide a kapara, right? Is to provide a kapara, and he doesn't necessarily link it to the next pasuk. This idea of to serve me, lechahanoli. We're understanding, by the way, as Rashi says as well. Rashi says loshen kahuna is sheira, is serving. That's what it really means. The word lechahano means to serve. That's what it means, right? But perhaps that's within that is the element of atonement as well. But how does that work? He says. How does it work? What has that got to do with this covered and tiferes, the glory and the splendor? So he says. It's because he wears these garments and because he is honored by the people through what he wears, in other words, and through the way he conducts himself. Therefore, people will learn from him. People will learn Torah from him, as he brings a famous pasuk in Malachi, Ki sifsei kohen yishmru das, the Torah yavakshim epiyu, Ki malach Hashem tzvokosu. What people will learn from him or seek Torah from him, and that means to say that what that means to say, what happens is that Hashem gives this honor to Aharon. The Medrash says that he dressed them almost like the angels, like the Malachim, and therefore, as the Pasuk carries on in Malachi, which describes the role of the Kohen, the Rabbim Heishiv Me'ovid, to be able to turn many away from sin. So, in other words, he says like this, he says, if the Kohen would wear garments that weren't very respectable, that didn't have that level, those qualities, and people looked down at him, he wouldn't treat him seriously in terms of his chokhmah either. And therefore, he wouldn't have the effect. Umimela, he says, and it comes out, HaKovod v'hatiferes sheb'bigdei kohana, the kovod, the honor, and the splendor of the bigdei kohana, heim hagarmim, they are the factors that cause sheyiyu habagodim achaprim. That is what causes the garments, the begodim, to atone. So his perspective is, and it could be, as I said, that this is a way of resolving these two different reasons, right? If you can understand, which is not entirely clear, that the way lechahanoli, to serve me, included in that is the way the garments function as a part of the kapara, of the atonement, right? So what is the role of this glory and splendor? And the answer is because the begodim themselves ensure that he is elevated in his position. People will show respect to him and they will learn from him if he conducts himself in a way that is befitting and he looks the part, but more than just obviously externally. It will also be, because that's what the Pasuk in Malachi is talking about. This is where the Gemara famously understands it. If the person who is teaching Torah is compared to a Malach Hashem, right, then people will be able to learn, and people will inspire and will take inspiration and draw on the values that he wishes to impart. So that's the explanation of the Oslam Torah. Now, I saw a beautiful pshat from Rabbi Weinfeld, as mentioned closely many times. It was the Rav Meshul Eidos done in Ratashkol, very, very big Talmud Chacham. Has some beautiful and profound ideas, and he presents the following resolution of this contradiction, or what it seems to be. Yeah, and he asks it. He says, actually, it's an even bigger question, right? Because on the one hand, it seems to, as we said, a bit of a contradiction. Is it for kavod or tiferes, or is it serve me, chanoli? But even if you could reconcile the two, perhaps like Osnaim Torah does, right? You can serve both functions. But he says it would make more sense if the Pasuk would first put the important description. What is the primary role? L'chanoli, they're to serve me. That's what they're for. That is the purpose of everything. That's what it's for. That is what is the purpose of the Mishkan is, and the garments form a central part of that. And then afterwards, you give the secondary reason, which is also that it elevates him and it gives him kavod and tiferes. And he suggests the following answer. He says the Drashas Aharon says in his Drashas Drush Chamishi, he talks about the Gemara in Adorim, and he's bothered by the Gemara in Adorim says, and this is anyone who's learned this Gemara is puzzled by the same thing. The Gemara says, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shchinosoi Ela Al, Hashem only rests his divine presence, his Shechina Ela Al Chocham Gibar va'asher va'anov, right? On a person who is wise, and a person and Gibar, strong and wealthy, and also humble. The Kulam in Moshe. We learn more from Moshe. As the Gemara says, Moshe had all these qualities, and therefore the Shekhinah only rests on a person with all these qualities together, right? So the question is, and there are others as well. I think he talks about Baal Koma as well. So height, it's got tall, all these things. These are all physical qualities. Why should the Novi, right? Why should Nevuah, the ability for prophecy to be bestowed on a person, why should it depend on things like how tall he is? Very difficult to understand. And he quotes here a lovely story. He said that he had a Rebbe whose name was Reb Sholem Menashe Gottlieb, and he was Rosh Yeshiva of Beis HaTalmud, which I think is a yeshiva in America, and he's very short. This Rosh Yeshiva was very, very short. And at his Levaya, so there was a Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva called Nachlas Halavim in Haifa. And he said that he was once walking with Rabbi Leib Malin, who was a Talmud, I think, of the Chofetz Chaim, or at least he knew of the Chofetz Chaim. That's right. And he was walking in New York, and Rabbi Leib Malin said to this Rav who he was walking with, this Rav Weiss, who was this Rosh Hashiva of Nachlas Alavim. He says that he was once walking with Rabbi Yerucham, and they saw the Chofetz Chaim from a distance, right? They could see the Chofetz Chaim was there, and Radin probably saw him from a distance. And Yerucham takes out his hand, and he points with his finger in the distance, and he says in Yiddish, Gibakuk, Azoy Klein and Azoy Gross, right? Yeah, so small and yet so big. Chofetz Chaim was very, very short, right? So that was the Chofetz Chaim. So the question is obvious, what does it mean? What does it mean? So the Ran says like this, that if the Novi needed the Nevuah, the quality of Nevuah for himself and no one else, right, then he wouldn't need any physical qualities, right? The spiritual qualities would be enough, right? However, the reality is that the Novi has to be able to give over the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the people, and he needs to be accepted by all types of people. That's how it is. And therefore, think about it like this. The Ran says, those who are attuned to Chochmah will say, well, we can only accept the words of the Novi if he's a Chacham. Those who are attuned to all the other milas, whether they're physical or spiritual, will say we can only accept him if he's less, if he's tall, if he's this, if he's a gibber, if he's strong, etc., right? It's all these qualities fit different types of people within the the people who make up Klal Yisrael. And the idea is that in order for the Nevuah to have maximum acceptance, that's why he has to have all of these qualities. And he says that's how you can understand the big Kohen of the function, he says, right? The main function is, of course, the Kadsho Chanun. But for the Kohenim to be expected and to be accepted and respected by all, it's similar to Oznaim LaTorah. The big Kohen need to be L'Chovod U'Leseferes. And that's why he puts it first, because it's a prerequisite, right? It's a prerequisite. You have to be in a position where people will accept the authority, be able to hear, be able to listen. Otherwise, no matter what message you have, if you're not in a position where people can hear the message, right, and they're going to respect you for the message, it doesn't matter what you try and say, because it's not going to go in. That's the idea, right? And therefore, that's why clearly the key point is to serve Hashem. But that's what the begodim were for. The way and the means was the Kovod and the Tiferes. Now, the second idea of Weinfeld shares is how the difference between the two places that Aharon HaKohen carries the names of the Shvatim. And this really goes to the heart of what Aharon HaKohen's role is in representing and his connection to the Bnei Yisrael. Because we know there are two places that he carries the names, right? He carries them on his shoulders, on the Avnei Shoyam, right? And there were 6 on one and 6 on the other. Shisham Mishmos 11 Achas, Shisham Mishmos 11 Ashiyah. So that's what the Torah says, 6 on each side, on those stones there. And then, of course, he carries them independently, right, on the Choshen as well, right, on the breastplate. So he carries them. So what is the difference between the two? Why is it that they're carried in groups on the shoulders and they're individual on the Choshen itself? He suggests as follows, that what it represents, the stones the stones on the shoulder represents the responsibility that he has in carrying Klal Yisrael, carrying the Bnei Yisrael. And in this, there's an equal responsibility. So they group together. 6 there, 6 there, they're on just 2 stones. They're grouped together because he has an equal responsibility for all in terms of the way he carries them, right? In terms of when he enters and performs the avodah on their behalf. But when it comes to carrying them on his heart, right, then every individual person has to have an individual place in his heart. It doesn't matter. You can't group them together. You can't bear them. You can't. It's not the same as carrying them. Carrying them and bearing responsibility for them, like the shoulder, right? They can be grouped together. But when he carries them on his heart, on the Choshen, there has to be individuality. He has to feel for each individual independently, right? That's the notion of the Choshen. And he says something very profound. He says that if you look carefully, and you'll see this, that if you look, you can actually it's actually worth seeing inside. You go all the way back to Perek Dalet, Posuk Yud Dalet, which is really the first time we're introduced to Aharon HaKohen, beginning in Shmos. I mean, we know, well, obviously he's there beforehand, but the you look at Perek Dalet, Posuk Yud Dalet. Hashem says when Moshe Rabbeinu was refusing, he says, "Shlach no b'yad tishlach." I don't want to go. Send whoever you're going to send with. Vayicharaf Hashem b'Moshe. Vayomer, he said, Haloi Aharon achicha Levi. Aharon achicha, your brother, the Levi. Yodati ki daber edrehu. V'gam inehu yotzei lechasecha. He's going out towards you. V'roachad, he has seen you. He sees you. V'samach b'libo, and he rejoices in his heart. Okay, v'samach b'libo. He is rejoicing in his heart. And the Gemara says, Rashi says there on that pasuk, right? He doesn't care. You think he's bothered that you're becoming greater than him and you're going to be the leader? And Misham says Rashi, and it's from here that Aaron gets the choshen, right? The adornment, the adi means like adornment, right? The adornment of the choshen on the heart, because he was rejoicing, because he was and he's genuinely happy for Moshe Rabbeinu's success. Therefore, he gets the choshen, the breastplate on the heart. So it's because of everything stems from this. Everything stems from this, and he brings here. Reb Tzadok HaKohen says that he was defined as the Ohev Yisrael, right, all the way to the end of his life, right? That's how it worked. When everyone, when HaKohen famously, when he dies, everyone B'nai Yisrael, everyone mourns for Aharon HaKohen because he's the one who creates shalom, he's the one who's peace. How does he get to all of that? Because he really feels for them genuinely in his heart. And he says, Reb Tzadok says that he says, Ha'ohev Yisrael, hein ohev enoso. One who loves Jews, one who loves Yisrael, they will love him in return. That's what he was, and that's why it says, everyone mourned when he passed away. And he says, Yisrael, to the heart of Aaron, who really loved the Bnei Yisrael, all of the secrets of their individual needs and requirements and what each nefesh required was revealed, right, at their roots. In other words, how is it? He seems to be trying to explain on a ruchnius, a spiritual level, how is it that the choshen on the heart is able to reveal these secrets, right? The choshen that could be asked, and the urim v'tumim, because of that connection. He has that connection in that way, to the extent they can ask things from the urim v'tumim. He says that the people would ask questions. They had to be the right sort of person, able to ask. We know the stories from Nach when they asked advice from the urim v'tumim, etc., etc. But in order to answer, and this goes for halachic questions as well, you have to know the person. You have to deeply understand the person. You have to know who's asking. It depends on the shoel, the questioner. It depends on the context. But you have to know all this. That's all part of the role. And the choshen, he says, it's called the choshen mishpat, right? It has the element of judgment. It's going to provide the answers. Sometimes they didn't like the answers, right? There is a judgment element there, the mishpat. But it's only because it's on the lave of someone like Aharon HaKohen. It's on his heart. The person who is the genuine v'rachav somach b'libo, he sees and rejoices in his heart. He has that quality of Ohev Yisrael, and therefore he's not wrapped up in himself. There's no ego there. That is how he's able to remove bias, he's able to look at a person objectively. And with this, he says that we can understand a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that Rabbi Yochanan said to his Talmidim, go and see right? What's the upright way? How should a person conduct themselves? And famously, all his Talmidim, they went and they gave different perspectives, right? Ayin tova, a good eye, a chover tov. Shachid Rosh Shimon says a roya es hanolat, someone who sees what's going to happen, who's roya es hanolat. And Reb Lezer says leiv tov, and he answers roya. He says to them, I see divrei Elazar ben Arach shevachal do devrichem. He favors the words of Rabbi Elazar, who says leiv tov, a good heart, because he says everyone else is included in Rabbi Lezer's words. And he says the biggest problem with this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. All the others you can understand. A good eye, an ayin tov, and a chover tov, and a good friend, a good neighbor. You can understand all of those things are included in the concept of leiv tov, a good heart. But how is haraya es hanolat, someone who's able to see, to think 2 steps ahead, how is that included in a leiv tov, in a good heart? So he says the answer is that Royas Hanolad means that I see how A leads to B and B will lead to C, how things will evolve. What prevents us seeing what is likely to happen? What is it? Because we're not able to see things objectively. We insert ourselves, our own ego, into the situations we face in life, the people we see, the things we meet, encounters we have, right? We always insert ourselves. That's part of human nature. We see things from our jaded perspective, right? A person, we see what we want to see, basically, with our own nagias. What happens with a leiv tov, it means you have the ability to step outside of your own self-interest. That is a leiv tov, a good heart. You don't look at it with your own self-interest. There's no ego there. You step away from that. And that means a person can be royas hanolad. You're able to see genuinely what is likely to transpire because you can look at a situation objectively. It's a very difficult thing to do, but that's what a leiv tov does. And that's how someone who's royas hanolad can also is included in leiv tov. We went on to explain how you see this in many Gedolei Yisrael, how they're great chochma, iluyim, they were geniuses in so many ways, but the story so often that people tell about them is the way they're able to have sensitivity and chesed and kindness to people. That is what really made them who they were. And they're essentially what he's trying to explain is I think what is a really profound idea, that difference between yes, Aharon HaKohen would carry a responsibility. That was his role. He was the Kohen Gadol, responsibility for all of Klal Yisrael. He carried them all on his shoulders, right? When he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he was representing Klal Yisrael, but on his heart they were individual people. And because he was V'rachav V'samach V'libay, and he defines his mission and his journey in life, and he's presented to us. That's basically one of the first times we meet Aharon HaKohen, when he comes out and Moshe Rabbeinu has suddenly jumped ahead of him, and he's his younger brother, and he's V'rachav V'samach V'libay. He's happy. I'm happy for you. I'm genuinely happy. That leiv, that heart of Aharon HaKohen, from there everything comes. That's how he gets the Choshen Mishpat, because he's able to temper Mishpat, justice, with chesed, with a genuine leiv, with that leiv tov, right? And that carries through all the way. And that's why he is, at the end of his life, he is the one who everyone recognizes and realizes. They mourn for him. Everyone mourned for him because of what he had achieved and because of the individual personal relationship and the shalom he had brought to Klal Yisrael. So I think that we learn a lot from the Parshas Tetzaveh. In some ways, is really the Parsha of Aharon HaKohen in many ways. And I think these ideas hopefully provide some inspiration to that. Okay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a good evening. Okay.